It began on a night when thunder rolled like cannon fire across the valley, and rain beat against the tents of the 12th Infantry Division. The soldiers huddled close to the fires, whispering rumors of an ambush that never came. Inside the largest tent, General Marcus Kane studied the map, his gray eyes sharp under the flickering lamplight. Every man in that camp feared him. Every man except one woman who stood quietly by the edge of the table, her presence barely noticed. Her name was Lieutenant Alara Voss, and though she wore the same uniform as the others, Kane treated her like a shadow, useful at times, invisible always. He believed she was there only because of orders from above, a token of political correctness in a man's war. She didn't correct him. She didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer of all. When the meeting ended, Kane turned to her with a tight smile. "You'll take the communications team, Lieutenant. Keep the lines clear. Leave the fieldwork to the real soldiers." Alara saluted without a word. The soldiers around her smirked. She left the tent as the thunder cracked again, her boots sinking into the mud. Somewhere beyond those hills, enemy scouts were watching. She knew it. She could feel it like a pulse beneath her skin. That night, as the men drank and laughed around the campfire, she climbed the ridge alone. Her coat was soaked, her hair plastered to her face, but her eyes, steady and alert, searched the darkness. She had been raised in the mountains, taught to listen for the difference between silence and danger, and tonight the silence was wrong. It wasn't the calm before the storm. It was the breath before the kill. When she reached the top, she dropped to her stomach and peered through her binoculars. Faint movements flickered among the trees, too organized for animals. She counted 12. No, 14. The enemy was closer than Kane believed. She took out her radio to warn him, but before she could speak, the signal crackled, then died. Jammed. She was alone. Back in camp, Kane ordered the troops to rest. "The enemy won't strike tonight," he said, tapping the map. "They'd be fools to cross the river in this weather." Alara ran back down the ridge, boots splashing through the mud. By the time she burst into Kane's tent, soaked and breathless, he looked up in irritation. "Lieutenant, this better be good. They're coming," she said. 2 miles north. I saw them, at least 14, maybe more. "They're using signal jammers." Kane's lip curled. "You saw them? At night, in a storm?" He turned to his officers, chuckling. "Gentlemen, our lieutenant must have seen her own shadow." "I'm not wrong," she insisted. "If we move now, enough," he snapped. "You're dismissed." She hesitated, her fists clenched, but she saluted again and walked out. No one stopped her. No one believed her. Hours later, the first explosion tore through the camp. A shell hit the west flank, throwing mud and fire into the air. Men screamed. Horses broke loose. The storm of battle swallowed everything in sound and chaos. Alara ran toward the armory, grabbing a rifle and a handful of grenades. Through the smoke, she saw General Kane shouting orders, his voice drowned by the roar of artillery. The enemy was everywhere, emerging from the woods like ghosts, their silhouettes lit by fire. Kane's headquarters collapsed in a burst of flame, and she lost sight of him. Most would have fled, but Alara didn't. She ducked behind an overturned wagon, loading her rifle, eyes darting through the inferno. She found 3 soldiers pinned under debris, terrified and bleeding. "Get up," she shouted. "We fight or we die." Something in her tone broke through their fear, and they followed her. With only 4 of them, she began to counterattack, precise, silent, relentless. Every shot she fired hit its mark. They took back the west barricade, one trench at a time. When the ammo ran low, she scavenged from the fallen. When one of her men was hit, she dragged him to cover herself. The mud was slick with blood, the air heavy with smoke, but she kept moving. Hours passed like minutes. When dawn broke, the storm had quieted, but the battlefield was worse than any nightmare. The enemy had retreated, leaving bodies scattered like shadows frozen in mud. Alara stood on the ridge, her uniform torn, her hands shaking. Behind her, the surviving soldiers stared in disbelief. She had led them to victory without orders, without recognition, without backup. Then came the sound of boots crunching on gravel. General Kane emerged from the ruins, his arm bandaged, his face pale. His eyes swept over the scene, the destroyed camp, the surviving troops, and the young woman standing at the center of it all. For a moment, he said nothing. "What happened here?" he finally asked. Alara turned, meeting his gaze. "You were wrong," she said quietly. He flinched. Around them, the soldiers watched, their respect shifting, settling on her. Kane's jaw tightened. You disobeyed orders. I saved your men, she replied. Her voice didn't rise, but the truth in it cut sharper than any blade. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Kane turned away, muttering something about luck and circumstance. But she saw it, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He knew. After that night, something changed. Kane didn't dismiss her anymore, but he didn't praise her either. He gave her the most dangerous assignments, perhaps hoping she'd fail. But she didn't. Each mission only added to the whispers that followed her name. Voss the Ghost, they called her. The one who moved unseen and struck like lightning. Months passed and the war deepened. The enemy pushed harder, smarter. Kane's strategies began to crumble. He refused to adapt, too proud to listen. One evening during a briefing, Alara studied the map and saw it, a hidden valley route the enemy could use to flank them. She spoke up. If they come through here, we'll be surrounded within a day. Kane scoffed. Impossible. No one could cross that terrain. But they can, she said. I've crossed it myself. The room went silent. Kane's glare was icy. You're overstepping, Lieutenant. I'm trying to keep us alive. He slammed his fist on the table. Enough, you'll follow orders, not rewrite them. She stared at him for a heartbeat, then saluted. But this time she didn't walk away in silence. If you're wrong again, General, she said softly, there won't be anyone left to say I told you so. That night, as the camp slept, Alara packed her gear. She couldn't ignore what she'd seen. She slipped away through the fog, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. The valley loomed ahead, dark, dangerous, unknown. She went alone, because sometimes you don't wait for permission to do what's right. By dawn, she reached the ridge above the valley and froze. Below her, a massive column of enemy troops moved silently through the mist. Dozens of them, hundreds. The entire army was marching straight toward Kane's camp. If they reached it by morning, everyone would die. Alara's heart pounded. She couldn't fight them all. She couldn't radio back. The jammers were already active again. There was only one thing she could do: delay them. Somehow, she took a deep breath, unslung her rifle, and looked at the dynamite strapped to her pack. The rain began to fall again, soft at first, then heavy. She smiled faintly. Guess it's just you and me again, she whispered to the storm. And then she started running down the ridge, toward the army that had no idea one woman was about to stand in its way. She sprinted through the mud, her breath sharp and fast, lightning flashing across her face. The valley roared with the low hum of enemy trucks and marching boots, the sound of hundreds closing in. Alara ducked behind a boulder, rain soaking her uniform, fingers trembling not from fear but from calculation. She studied the curve of the cliffs above, the narrow pass, the loose stones, the bridge they'd have to cross. If she could take out that bridge, she could trap them here. But it would mean no way out for her either. She pulled out the dynamite, her hands steady now. She set the charges along the base of the wooden bridge, mud slipping beneath her knees. Her mind raced, not in panic, but with precision. Her father used to tell her, bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's about moving through it anyway. His voice echoed now, like the storm itself urging her on. When the first wave of soldiers appeared, torches flickering through the mist, she froze. They were closer than she expected. A single wrong move and they'd spot her. She pressed herself flat against the rock, the wind whipping her hair into her eyes. The leader barked orders in a foreign tongue, pointing toward the ridge above. They were scouting ahead. If they found the bridge wired, all would be lost. She crawled closer, heart pounding so loud she thought they'd hear it. One soldier turned suddenly, his flashlight sweeping over the path. It stopped inches from her face. Time held its breath. Then thunder cracked, lightning flashed, and the light moved on. She exhaled silently. Not yet. Not now. As the troops began to cross, she waited, counting, measuring, judging the weight of their footsteps. The wood creaked under them. When the last truck began to roll across, she struck the detonator. The explosion split the sky. The bridge erupted in fire and smoke, splintering into the gorge below. The sound shook the mountains. Bodies, vehicles, weapons, all gone in a roar of flame and chaos. Alara was thrown backward, her head striking stone. Everything went black. When she opened her eyes, it was dawn again. The rain had stopped. The smoke rose like ghosts from the valley, and the distant rumble of retreat echoed into silence. She tried to stand, but her legs screamed in pain. Shrapnel had torn through her thigh. Blood soaked her uniform, but she didn't care. She had stopped them. She had saved them all. She crawled toward a ridge where she could see the plain below. In the far distance, faint columns of smoke rose from Kane's camp, but they were still standing. The attack had never reached them. She smiled weakly. "You're welcome, General," she whispered, then slumped against the rock. Hours later, a patrol found her. Barely conscious, covered in mud and ash, she was carried back to camp on a stretcher. Kane stood over her as medics worked to stop the bleeding. His eyes were shadowed, unreadable. When she finally came to, her throat dry and cracked, he was sitting beside her cot. "You disobeyed direct orders again," he said quietly. She tried to laugh, but coughed instead. "You're welcome again." He looked at her for a long time, the kind of look that measures truth against pride. Finally, he said, "We found what was left of the enemy column." "You stopped an entire division," she blinked at him. "Then say it," he frowned. "Say what?" "That you were wrong." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I was wrong," he admitted. The words sounded foreign coming from him. "But I can't let the men know you acted alone. If they believe officers can ignore orders..." She turned her head away. "You're still thinking about your command." "I was thinking about their lives." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left to argue. By the time Alara recovered, word of her actions had spread through the ranks. The men whispered her name with reverence now. Voss the Ghost was no longer a myth. She was the soldier who had stopped an army with her own hands. The general might have buried the truth in his reports, but the soldiers who had lived because of her, they carried it like a legend. Weeks later, a letter arrived from High Command. General Kane had been promoted. The division was moving to a new front, and Alara was reassigned to intelligence. It was meant as a quiet punishment, a way to keep her out of sight. But she didn't mind. She'd learned something deeper than rank. That truth doesn't need applause. It just needs to be lived. Still, fate wasn't done with her. On her first mission in intelligence, she intercepted coded messages from the enemy. The codes described something called Operation Ashfall, a final offensive planned for the capital itself. The plan was brilliant, ruthless, and unstoppable, unless someone within could expose it. She brought the information to her superior officer, General Kane. His face turned pale as he read it. "If this is true," he said slowly, "they'll hit the capital within a week." "It's true," she said, "and I know how they're doing it." "Through the eastern tunnels." He studied her, suspicion flickering again. "And how would you know that?" "Because that's where I'd go," she replied. For a moment, silence. Then Kane looked at her with something she'd never seen in him before. Respect. "What do you propose?" She leaned forward. "Let me go in first." He shook his head. "You're still recovering. You'd never make it out alive." "Maybe not," she said, "but I'll make sure they don't either." He stared at her, torn between command and conscience. Finally, he nodded. "Go." That night, she led a small team through the tunnels beneath the ruined outskirts. The air was thick with dust, the walls trembling from distant explosions. Every step deeper felt like stepping into the mouth of the earth itself. Her flashlight caught fragments of abandoned equipment, the scent of fuel heavy in the air. They found the charges, hundreds of them, set to bring down the tunnels once the enemy reached the capital. A trap designed to collapse everything above: homes, hospitals, civilians. Alara's stomach turned. They had less than an hour before detonation. She worked fast, cutting wires, deciphering circuits. But the system was complex, layered, encrypted. She realized then, someone would have to stay behind to manually stop the countdown. Her team protested. She silenced them with a look. "If I don't make it, tell Kane. He finally taught me something." "What's that?" one of them asked. "That even generals can change." They fled the tunnels. She stayed, alone again, surrounded by humming machinery and the ticking sound of her own heartbeat. The clock hit 30 seconds, 20, 10. She closed her eyes, thinking not of death but of the rain that always came before victory. Then, silence. The city never fell. The explosion never came. But when the rescue teams entered the tunnels hours later, they found nothing. No trace of her. Only her broken insignia lying beside the defused bomb. General Kane stood over that spot for a long time. The rain poured again, washing mud and ash into the earth. For the first time in his life, he saluted someone who wasn't there. Years later, soldiers still spoke her name. Some said she died that night. Others whispered she lived, working in the shadows, the ghost who saved them twice. The truth became legend, and the legend became something greater, a reminder that valor doesn't always wear medals, and heroes don't always stand in the light. In the end, what mattered wasn't how she died, but how she lived, unseen, underestimated, and unbroken. Sometimes the quietest souls carry the loudest courage, and that's the truth that even the proudest general could never forget.